Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Aravaipa Rides podcast. I'm your race director, Aaron. In this episode, I interview Taylor Lideen at his home in Northwest Arkansas. I'm at home here in Arizona, so this is a virtual podcast, no in studio. But we had a really good talk about his schedule coming up this year for 2024, some of the challenges that he's faced as a professional athlete, and the mutual weather going on both in Arkansas and Arizona at the time of the interview. So I hope you all enjoy. Well, welcome. Good to finally talk to you.
Yeah, thanks for
It's been a few weeks, a couple of months at this point, maybe, of some emails going back and forth. And I apologize. I probably should have checked out the website where it clearly states you're living in Northwest Arkansas right now. But I assumed the first couple of communications you were still here, based on what I knew. I don't. Do you remember a gentleman by the name of Bryce Brooks? He also works with us
yes,
here
it
at
sounds
Aravaipa.
familiar.
He's a friend of Dylan as well.
Yeah.
And I think the two of them maybe were, I think he met you on a trail somewhere. I think the two of them were out running.
Okay.
But he was instrumental. He was like, you got to get this guy on the podcast. You got to talk to Taylor. So I credit Bryce. But anyway, yeah, it was. I just assumed at that point that you were still here. I'd known your name too, just in the circles of riding and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, he's just around the corner. We'll be able to get this together, and he'll come in and sit down on the couch,
Yeah.
and we'll have this great conversation. And like 2 or 3 weeks into it, you're like, I'm in Arkansas, dude.
Yeah.
So I apologize for that, but
No, man, I appreciate
good
you.
to have you here.
I appreciate you making the time, and yeah, it's been apologies for going back and forth on email, but I'm glad we got this going.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. So tell us. So you've been in Arkansas now for a little bit. How long is that?
Yeah, November was 2 years, so
Okay, so it has been a little bit.
been a little bit. Yeah, it's time's flown. Um, we actually had never even been to the state, and we
Okay.
just wanted to go try something new and had
Okay.
heard about Bentonville, obviously, like most people have. And man, it's been the best decision we've ever made. We're super,
Okay.
super happy with it.
Very cool. Aside from the weather right now, for everyone here, we had a conversation just before we started recording. But as you can see, he's wearing a hat indoor, folks. So it's a bit chilly over there.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's like we're trying to preserve the propane for our fireplace and trying to make sure we drip faucets overnight because it's been brutally cold the past couple of days. It's
wow.
been a wind chill of 20 below, and today's actually the warmest day we've had in like 3 or 4 days. It's 16 right now. um, and we probably got 5 inches, 4 or 5 inches of snow
Okay.
the past 24 hours. So for here, that's a lot.
Yeah.
We don't have plows running 24/7
Right.
like a ski town does, but
Yeah.
I mean, weather like this is pretty rare for here. It'll happen a couple times during the winter, but overall, I'd say we can ride year round, other than right now, obviously.
When it's happening. Yeah. When it's
Yeah,
actually happening.
yeah,
Yep. Yeah. I was gonna say, as far as I know of the area, they have generally mild winters. They're not too crazy. So
yeah,
um, stinks that you have to go through it, but I guess that's just part of rolling with life, right? Sometimes you have, as they say, sometimes you get lemons, sometimes you get lemonade. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
lemons time.
It's funny. Like it's it's not an annoyance to me, but it's almost like it's so easy to complain about weather, right? It's like the weather's never
Sure.
perfect. Living in
Yep.
Phoenix our whole lives, it was like we could always complain about the summers, but
Yep.
it's summer in Phoenix. Like, what do you expect? It's going to be hot
Right.
from basically May until September. So
Yep.
it's like
Yeah. Just
it's
get used to
winter
it.
and it's winter here. It's going to be cold. It just is what it is.
Yep. Yep. Well, it's good that there's another place out there that you can ride year round, because we always talk about that here as one of the
Yeah.
benefits of living in Arizona. And we do have some stifling summers and some winters that can get a little, at least, the nights can drop into some definitely some cold weather. Usually not the precipitation kind of weather, but it will get, the desert gets pretty cold at night during these months. But we can still go out, right? You just put on another layer and it doesn't really stop you from riding. So
Yeah.
it's still a great place to be if you're into outdoor sports, for sure.
Yeah. People underestimate how cold the desert gets at night.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
It's
that dry air, it doesn't
gets
hold
really
anything.
cold. Yeah.
Yep, yep, yeah. I'm glad. Like I said, it's been a little cold the recent weeks, and just today, I think it's. I don't think it's hit 60. It's about 64, 65 just now. So, not too bad. Like a good January day for Arizona, that's for sure.
Yeah. Perfect.
Um, did you when you moved to Arkansas, was that and you started to say stuff about it, but was it it was premeditated obviously, but was it something that you had really had an eye for? I think a lot of people have misconceptions about the middle part of the country being really really flat, but from what I know, the Bentonville area is anything but, right?
Yeah. It's not flat at all. I end up
Yeah.
getting more. I end up getting more vert here, way more vert here than I did in living in Arizona.
Wow.
Everything, at least in the Northwest Arkansas area, is just very, very, very steep.
Hmm.
You can go places where it's a lot flatter, but we have obviously the little pocket that we're in, the Bentonville area. Obviously, people have heard of all the trails here. The gravel roads are just as good, if
Yeah.
not even better than the trails. And then just south of us, I can hop in my car and 20 to 30 minutes drive down to the Boston Mountain Range.
Okay.
And there's legit climbs out there. There's 30-minute, 40-minute climbs just
Wow.
down the road from us.
Yep.
And it's really remote too. Like you can get out there and not
Okay.
see like I can ride. If I go out in the Boston Mountain Range, I can ride for 4 to 6 hours this time of year and maybe see one or two people the
Okay.
whole time I'm out.
Nice.
So yeah, it's definitely not flat, and it's good and bad, I guess. Right?
Sure.
I like climbing because when you climb, you get the descent out of it. But at the same time,
Right.
it can be a little challenging, kind of marking out routes for easier days. But you can definitely find it.
Yeah. So was the move for your riding, or was there other motives involved?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a two-part answer. My wife and I we met in Phoenix, in high school in Phoenix, actually,
Cool.
Desert Vista High School. So we have both lived most of our lives in the Ahwatukee area,
Okay.
which is, for people that are familiar, just on the south side of South Mountain. It's kind of like a cul-de-sac there.
Yeah.
And we spent a year in Colorado in 2014 and 2015 up in the mountains, and that was enough for me. I was like, the winter was just too harsh. So we came
Gotcha.
back to Phoenix in 2015, and we've been renting the same home from 2015 to 2021. And we kind of started talking about trying to purchase our first home. And
Okay.
right around that time is when everything in Phoenix just kind of blew up. It was,
Right.
for first time home buyers like us, it was kind of, I wouldn't say it was impossible, but it was pretty close to being impossible.
Okay.
And we also just wanted to go experience something different, right? Like
Yeah.
we're young, we don't have kids, we don't plan on having kids, but it was like, let's just go try something. So for cycling, it was kind of like, all right, let's check out Utah, let's check out Colorado. Obviously, those are kind of the first two spots you look at, and
Sure.
it's kind of the same luck, right? Everything was super expensive for first time home buyers. So we both said, like, what about Arkansas? We've heard about Arkansas. And we had this conversation in the summer of 21. And I think it was within 5 days, my wife hopped on a plane, flew out here by herself. She toured 10 houses in a weekend. And then
Wow.
she called me. We did a FaceTime, found this house. And I was like, I trust what you pick.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, I trust her judgment. So she picked the house, and I think it was a month and a half later we moved out here.
Wow.
So
Crazy.
we never really all we knew about Arkansas was where it was on a map.
Okay.
And then obviously reading stuff online about Bentonville, and yeah, it's turned out to be such a good move for us. It's a really really tight knit community here. The cycling community is amazing. Obviously,
Yeah.
there's so much to do outside of cycling too.
Very cool.
We have lakes in our neighborhood, I would call it.
Yeah.
There's live music all the time. There's no shortage of things to do in Northwest Arkansas. It's been amazing.
Nice. It was a good call for sure. Sounds like it.
Yeah, it's funny
Getting
because
out there.
when we decided, hey, we're gonna move to Arkansas, we told our friends and family. Like most of our family's back in Arizona still. I have my wife and I we have the same group of friends, and a lot of them are from elementary school. And when we told them,
Okay.
hey, we're going to Arkansas, they're like,
Right.
Arkansas? Like,
Right.
well, growing up in Arizona, Arkansas is kind of a random state, right? And
Sure. Yeah.
some of them have come and visited, and right when they get here, they're like, okay, I understand why you guys came here. So,
Very cool.
but Arizona still is definitely home. I mean, we visit Arizona, I'd say, or at least the 2 years we've been here, we've gone back for 2 to 4 weeks out of the year.
Okay. Yep.
So it's been
You
good.
still you grew up here, you said, so you still have family to come back to, or is it
Oh
just
yeah.
for friends and yeah,
Yep.
yeah, very cool. Is your wife into biking? Does she do outdoor stuff too? Was Bentonville a draw for her for that?
She definitely loves being outside. Yeah.
Okay.
She worked for Pivot Cycles for, I think it was nearly 7 years. So she really knows the cycling industry.
Yeah.
But bikes are not her passion at all. She
Gotcha.
doesn't ride. She's training right now for a marathon. So
Nice.
that's what keeps her busy. She loves taking the dogs. The trails are about a third of a mile from our house, so she can just walk down the street, be on the trails.
Yeah.
She loves it.
Very cool. I didn't realize that you were in Awatuki when you were here, living here. I'm just across the 10 in Chandler, the north part of Chandler, right on the Tempe border.
Yep.
So South Mountain's my playground too. It's kind of the home field. It's the
Yeah.
easiest one to get to if I want to if I want to ride, I can ride there and put in a bunch of miles, or I can drive if I feel like it. So it's fun. I'm surprised. Not that I know everyone on South Mountain. Here I am being presumptuous that we never ran into each other and on the mountain, because you do you're eventually you see somebody enough times, you stop
Oh, for
and
sure.
introduce yourself, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of that thing. But cool. When you were here, and what was your favorite route? Since we're talking South Mountain, where'd you like to go?
Oh man, South Mountain is. I mean, I'm probably biased, but South Mountain
For sure, right?
is this gem that I just wish everybody got to experience.
Yeah.
Like there's stuff for everybody there.
Right.
There's stuff that caters to people that are just getting into the sport of mountain biking, and then there's stuff for people that have been doing it for a long time. I really enjoyed getting up on top of the mountain, specifically the
Okay.
west side.
Mm,
I like the stuff that drops off National on the west side.
okay.
I just have a lot of fond memories from that, kind of getting into the
Sure.
sport and riding those trails with my dad specifically. That's kind of
Okay.
those trails have kind of like they kind of hold this special place for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, South Mountain is just it's such a good park to ride in.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't call it underrated, because I think especially at least within the Phoenix area, people know, probably outside Phoenix, outside Arizona, it's not as well known as some of the other spots, like Hawes within the Phoenix area, Sedona,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, something like that too. But I do hear it more and more when I run into people who are visiting from out of town and are here specifically to bike, or at least they plan on renting a bike while they're here, because they have heard good things. And South Mountain, more and more I'm hearing off their lips, they
Yep.
want to go ride South Mountain, which is good and bad, right?
Yeah.
It's nice to have that little gem. It's certainly busy, right? I mean, if you go out there on a weekend, or anytime like in the spring, any morning in the spring, it's packed with hikers and runners and dogs and bikes and the whole thing.
Yep.
But it's so worth it. And you're right, the West Side. I haven't been out on the West Side in a bit, but yeah, you get away from people. You get west of Telegraph Pass, and there's a lot less people in the way, and there's definitely some fun stuff out there.
For
and
sure.
and it's nice to have that solitude, to be able to get out there, whether you're riding or hiking. It's a nice little experience.
And it's so accessible, right?
Right.
It doesn't matter if you're on the north or south side of South Mountain.
Yep.
It's super easily accessible. You can even be like where you're at on the border of Chandler and Tempe, which
Yeah.
would like the east side, kind of the east end of
Right.
South Mountain. And
Yep.
you can get to the trailhead so easily.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Weekends, specifically this time of year, it's pretty crazy.
Sure. Yep.
That's the one thing I enjoy about the summer, especially if you get out early.
Yeah.
It's pretty quiet.
Yep. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with taking a night ride and turning on the lights, or
Yeah.
early morning.
Yeah.
Plus, it's more comfortable than even at 8 o'clock or so. So
Yeah.
it's definitely an easier ride for sure.
Exactly.
Well, since now you're in Arkansas, tell me a little bit about the trails there. I think Arkansas is becoming similar actually to South Mountain in that people are realizing that there's something there.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a few races, even Epic from right here in Tucson had a race out there for a number of years. Um, Tell me about some of your favorites. What have you found, and where do you like to go besides the Boston range?
I mean, for the mountain bike trails, obviously there's stuff in town in Bentonville proper.
Okay.
I'd say the most popular would be Kohler Mountain Bike Preserve and Slaughter Pen. Those
Oh,
are
okay.
very easily accessible right from town. And what's really cool
Gotcha.
about those areas is you can link up both those parks with like greenways, so you can kind of stay off main roads. And
Gotcha.
the town in general is so catered towards cyclists. Like
Okay.
you see people commuting back and forth from work just to go get coffee on a bike, and you
Yeah.
can hop on a trail to go from a coffee shop if you want. We live 5-10 miles north of Bentonville proper, so our
Okay.
backyard trails are what's called the back 40.
Okay.
We have the back 40 trails and the Little Sugar trails.
Hmm.
Uh, those are those are my favorite because you don't get as much traffic as stuff that's in Benton in town proper,
Okay.
and you can make bigger loops with those, right? And then
Yep.
also, if you get on those trails, you can then hop off those trails and ride gravel. You can ride some pretty cool paved Bella Vista roads that are really steep with a ton of climbing. There's
Okay.
just really there's the limit. It's endless out here. You can link up so many miles of trails, and what's really cool too is you can do them pretty much on one bottle because we have water pump stations
Oh
every,
wow.
yeah, I would say every 5-10-ish miles roughly.
Okay.
So it gets really brutally hot and humid here in the summer, and it's nice to have
Sure.
those kind of water fill stations every so often. So you don't have to really load up on water before you go with a super heavy pack, tons of bottles, and you can kind of
Right.
plan your stops accordingly.
That's awesome. That's really, I mean, that's like catering to bicycles, but on a whole different level.
Yeah.
Um, Somebody told me that, and I don't know if it's more like in town versus more suburban. That so there's a lot of places that you can find where the sidewalk is right on the side of the road, and then there can be like a dirt path um, that might be more fun. Let's say air quotes there, more fun for those of us who like the dirt versus the concrete. But I've been told that around that area, the dirt paths are even more mountain bike friendly, like actually throw in a few features or a few it's not just a straight path, right? It's not just somebody who carved out a path. Tell us about some of that stuff out there.
Yeah, it's funny. Like Bentonville's home of Walmart, right? So we do
Sure.
all of our grocery shopping at Walmart, and when we go into Bentonville to go grocery shopping, we take Northwest A in, and as we're driving southbound to get to this particular Walmart in the square, um, a section of trail parallels the road with a bunch of jumps. So you'll see like families with the parents front and back and the kids in the center, like going over the jumps as you're going to the
Oh
grocery.
wow.
And it's so common to see like you almost every car has a bike rack or
Okay.
bikes on them, and then you see people riding mountain bikes every day, and the amount of cyclists in town utilizing the trails to get from point A to point B, whether that's in town or out of town, there's no shortage of seeing cyclists all the time.
Pretty
It's
cool.
pretty cool to see, right? And
Yeah.
whether it's somebody coming and visiting and trying out the sport for the first time, renting a bike, or people
Yeah.
that are experienced just out there on a daily basis, families, you see kids. Some of the trails, they have trails that link up right to the local schools, so kids can ride trails to school,
Very cool.
which is pretty special.
That is very cool. I can imagine a few scuffed, excuse me, jeans
Yeah.
on the first day of school or on the, at school. It's, what happened, Jimmy? Oh, I didn't make that last jump before the
Yeah.
parking lot.
Bentonville problems.
Right.
Yeah.
How is that? So we're talking about different, two all year riding places. How has Bentonville changed up your training,
Yeah, I mean,
or
I
has it?
think that um I wouldn't say, I mean, I think that the trails here cater towards training a little bit more.
Okay.
Like South Mountain, right? South Mountain,
Yes,
in some ways, it's hard to ride easy there,
for sure.
because it's so rough, it's so rugged. There's so many ledges, there's so many step features. So it's like if you want to make it up certain climbs, you kind of have to put out 100% effort just to make it up something.
Right.
Whereas here, things are purpose built for bikes.
Okay.
So it makes the flow of your ride, at least in my opinion, a bit easier, and you
Hmm.
can make it as hard as you want.
Okay.
The thing that I really enjoy about the back 40 and Little Sugar is there's really no like let up in the terrain. You're either up or down. You're going through all these hollers in Bella Vista. That's kind of circumnavigate Bella Vista if you do the Little Sugar and back 40 loop. So you're up or down or up or down, and they've made it. They've made the trails in a way that it's all rideable,
Okay.
kind of regardless of your skill level. You can make it as hard as you want depending on the effort you put out. And so
Sure.
that I think caters towards like more structured training a bit better.
Yeah.
Um, and then the endless gravel directly from the house. Like
Okay.
I can be I can be on trail in 2 or 3 minutes. I can be on gravel in 5 minutes. A lot of the gravel stuff that I ride from the house is usually in southern Missouri because our
Okay.
house, kind of as a crow flies, is only about a mile from the Missouri border,
Okay.
and it's pretty remote out there in southern Missouri.
Yeah.
So,
Very neat.
yeah, I would say it's been for the better moving here in terms of the training aspect.
Very cool. Do you anticipate, or have you seen, are there more professionals moving into the area because of the newness, I guess, of it, the fact that it's becoming less than a hidden gem. Excuse me, I cannot say that at all. It's becoming more of a known gem. Do you
Yeah,
see more people kind of moving out and utilizing that area because of that?
yeah. Paige Onweiler just moved out here.
Mm.
She races in the Lifetime Series.
Yeah.
Um, Payson just purchased a home here. And then Cole and Sevilla they purchased a home here probably about a year ago.
Okay.
So they're not here full time, but they do spend more time here now that they kind of have a second home base. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's bringing people all the time. And if they're not here full time, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to be here once, if not twice a year. So
Okay.
there's always people coming in and out of town, and also the amount of events that are popping up here, that's growing on a yearly basis too.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of events do they show? I mean, you've got obviously a lot of trails, so assuming a lot of endurance, a lot of gravel,
Yep.
cross country more so. Or is there do they have do you ride enduro? Do you do some enduro events too?
That's
Or
where I
you
kind of got my start. Yeah.
it is okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I
We
thought I'd read that about you.
we
Um,
do have a pretty prominent enduro series here too.
okay.
So one thing that people I don't think fully understand about Northwest Arkansas is when they think of this area, all they think of is Bentonville, right? So
Sure.
they're going to come here, they're going to ride stuff from town, or they're going to ride stuff in Bella Vista. What I hope people start to understand is we have so much more than just what's in town. We
Yeah.
have things called monument trails here, and we have things called
Okay.
IMBA epic trails. And
Okay.
those are a lot of those are actually in kind of the middle of the state. Pinnacle, for example, is
Okay.
just outside of Little Rock. You
Okay.
can be to Little Rock from here in 3 to 3.5 hours. But we also have Hobbs, which is a monument trail, Hobbs State Park. That's just east of us near a big lake called Beaver Lake.
Okay.
And so there's no shortage of places to hold events, right? And
Yep.
I try to encourage people like, hey, we're coming here for a week. What should we ride? Definitely check out stuff in Bentonville and Bella Vista. But if you have
Okay.
the time and you want to go explore something, go check out a monument trail. Go check out an Epic trail. Go down south of Fayetteville and go in the Boston Mountain Range. Just go explore.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of events, like the enduro stuff pops up. I think we have 2 enduro series now.
Okay.
Big Sugar, which is a big gravel race in October. And then last year, they just added what's called Little Sugar, which is the week before Big Sugar, and that's a mountain bike race. And
Okay.
that utilizes the Little Sugar and Back 40 trails, which kind of circumnavigates Bella Vista. I think that was kind of the highlight of the year last year, to be able to race
Okay.
on like hometown trails.
Sure. Yeah.
Uh,
Right out of your front door.
yeah, and then obviously, like you said earlier, Epic Rides had their event here for a couple years. So, I mean, since we moved here, the Little Sugars popped up. Big Sugar, I think this past year was its 3rd year. So we're
Okay.
just going to see more events popping up here left and right. I really hope that we get a stage race here sooner rather than later.
Okay.
I think it would really cater towards people traveling from out of town. It would make things easy logistically because you kind of have a hub in Bentonville
Sure.
or Bella Vista, and everything
Yeah.
branches out from there. So it would make sense to me. Obviously, there's a lot more planning. Like
Yeah.
you would know that end of things, right?
Right. Right.
But it'd be a perfect place to host some type of stage race.
Cool. All right. I'll take some notes here and check it out.
Yeah.
Aravaipa can do their first Midwest
Yeah.
Midwest race. Bit of a jump from Arizona, but hey, you know what?
Yeah.
Get a dream big, right?
Yeah. Endless opportunity.
Very good. So is that a all these new ones? You find it mostly a good thing, bringing folks in to check out the trails for the first time and kind of putting the area on the map for mountain biking. There's always like a give and take, right? But I thought I'd ask your opinion there.
I'm all for it, right?
Yeah,
I think if you own a house here, you're all for it.
for
Like you want as many
sure.
people coming here, at least I do. I want as many people to come here and explore the area. And I remember when we moved here, how exciting it was just to hop on Strava and create routes, not
Okay.
knowing if they would work or not, and
Okay.
just going out and hey, let's see if I can link this up. I don't know what these trails are like. I don't know what these gravel roads are like,
Yeah.
and that's what's really exciting and fun for me is just going out and exploring. I
Yep.
love that part of the sport, um, and I hope other people can enjoy that as well. Like we may race a handful of times a year, 10,
Yeah.
15 times a year. The majority of our time spent outside, if it's on a bike or on foot, is exploring, right? So
Yeah.
that was really exciting for me, and I hope people can experience that same thing. And there's no shortage of that here.
That's awesome. It's a great sentiment. It's the kind of sentiment you want to end a podcast on, but we're way too early to do that.
Yeah, yeah,
No, but I do agree. I think the exploration. I mean, personally, that's the being outside part is the exciting part for me.
yeah,
And I'm not a professional racer. I'm not even a great racer. I'm a guy who likes to ride. I'm a guy who likes to run and hike and do different things. And I started as many people did, more road. I ran cross country in high school, but when as I became an adult and started running again, it was the 5Ks on the weekends and then 10Ks and then marathons and that kind of stuff. And it was always the road stuff. And I kind of forgot about trails for a little while, but then I got back here. We had moved here quite a while back, and I don't know, it was a few years. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go for. I saw somebody running on the trail. Actually, that's what it was. Like, I'm gonna go for one of these runs. I'm gonna find a trail. I'm gonna follow it, and then it just reopened that whole world. And of course, it's very different here than in a lot of places. I mean, The desert is a completely, I think, different ecosystem than most of the world,
Yep.
wherever you live, and it's pretty neat when you get out there and can get into some stuff and just just see what's around the next corner or over the next hill.
Yep.
I agree. It's probably my favorite thing part of this sport is just pointing the tire in a direction and seeing what happens. An hour later, where am I at?
Exactly. Just being, yeah, like you said, just being outside.
Yeah.
That's the best part, and that's why I think that's why South Mountain holds this special place in my heart for me. Is like
Yeah.
getting started in the sport, and I had no, I like we South Mountain was in my backyard, and I held off getting on a bike for the longest time. My dad had always been like, "Hey, South Mountain's in your backyard. You should get on a bike," because he
Yeah.
always raced mountain bikes, and I
Okay.
pushed it off, and I remember him taking me out for my first ride, and I was like, "Whoa, this is in our backyard! Like,
Yeah.
this is pretty cool." And I was hooked right away. And then just even being in high school and just going out and not knowing what trails were what. We didn't have Strava back then, right? It's like
Right.
you either looked at a trail map before you went, or you just took a left or took a right, and then you would either find your way back home or make a, you know what I
Right.
mean? That's
Yep.
the fun. That's the really fun part.
Yeah. You brought him up and you talked about him a minute ago. Your dad. So he was into the sport and raced as well, not just a rider, but he was a racer.
Yep. Yeah, he's the one who got me into the sport. He he always raced 24 hours of Moab on a team, on a 4-man team.
Okay.
That was always his big event for the year.
Yep.
And then when I got into the sport, he was racing downhill. And then
Okay.
that's how I got into the sport, was racing downhill and then enduro, and it's transitioned to what it is now. So
Gotcha.
yeah,
So he was. Go ahead.
it was special because he worked on the north side of the mountain. We obviously lived on the south side of the mountain, and so
Yep.
um, every week he would commute into work and then commute home.
Okay.
And so before school, when I first started getting into the sport, I would ride halfway into work with him and
Okay.
then ride back. And then the next day, I would usually meet him as he's coming home from work, and then we'd ride home together. And that
Nice.
was usually before school and after school, obviously. So that's kind of how I got my start into the sport. And yeah, that was all in South Mountain.
Very cool. So he was into endurance as well.
Yeah.
Maybe early on, I guess you were saying, and then kind of switched over to the downhill. Did he find downhill? Was there a prominent downhill scene here, or was he going elsewhere for it?
He was going elsewhere for it. So
Okay.
this was kind of before I started. This is before I even like got a bike. We would go to Bootleg Canyon in Boulder City, Nevada.
Vegas. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, just across the Hoover Dam there, just south of Las Vegas.
Yep.
And I would go with him and then just watch as a kid.
Okay.
And I think I was in middle school or early high school. And that kind of gave me the drive to, when we got home, hey, pick up a bike, and then
Okay.
I could get used to riding South Mountain. And then when he'd go to race, I could race too. And so
Very cool.
Bootleg at the time had a series. So that's kind of how I got my start in racing, was racing this series in Bootleg Canyon. And it's a short drive from Phoenix, right? We could be there in
Yeah.
5 hours. So we'd go
Yep.
to Boulder City probably 5 or 6 times a year to race or even just ride.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how he got into the downhill scene from the Bootleg Canyon series, and that's how I did as well.
Very cool. Yeah, I know a little bit of the canyon. You drive by it if you are driving to Vegas from Arizona, going through Boulder City there. So I've driven by it probably a dozen times in my life, but
Yeah.
never stopped. Talk about exploring. Never stopped to just get out of the car and walk for a few minutes to check it out.
Yeah.
I know some running events and some biking events. They're not sure exactly the style of either one, but I know Bootleg is still hopping as having some events there. So that's really cool. So if I can ask, so how long ago was this? Was this like 90s he was racing, late 80s? I mean, some of it obviously was with you too, but I guess probably prior to Taylor being around, he was probably out there doing some of this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, he'd always ridden bikes. He'd always had a
Okay.
mountain bike.
Yeah.
And then I would say he started racing a bit more in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, there was always bikes. I always remember him having nice mountain bikes when I was a young kid. Obviously, knew
Okay.
nothing about him.
Sure.
Um, but I would say he raced more in the late '90s, early 2000s than anything.
Okay. Very cool.
Yeah.
Was he into the MBAA was around back then here still? Was he into any of those races too? Did that
Yep.
cross his radar? Yeah.
Yeah, he was
Um,
racing those. I remember going to, I want to say it was either White Tanks or Estrella when I was a
okay.
little kid.
Yeah.
And just like being a little kid, being towed around by his dad and just either hanging out at the camp spot while he raced or
Yep.
waiting in the car, whatever it was. I remember it was one of the two, Estrella or White Tanks.
Somewhere on the west there.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, I had Tim Racette, who's the executive director of MBAA now.
Yeah.
He was on the podcast several months back, and we were talking about some of this because in just I guess in passing, I guess is to say, I've met a few people over the years who were like racing MBAA back then in like the late '90s, um, and I just I had to tell him, you got to tell me stories like what was it like back then, what were people riding, what were the trails like, it's we're talking like 20 25 years at this point.
Yeah.
um, you know the evolution of the sport, the equipment that we're riding. um, Obviously the trails change over time with some weather and just usage and stuff like that. So I've had some pretty neat stories from back then, but like before, certainly
Yeah.
before I wasn't even in the state at that point, so I knew nothing of the series or the area. So some pretty neat stuff for sure.
It's a pretty cool series, right? Like
Yeah.
I definitely miss having a winter series like that.
Hmm.
But I heard like back in the day it was huge, like especially for McDowell. I mean, McDowell is
Okay.
usually kind of always the big one, right? I
Yeah.
think it was just on Saturday, but
Yeah, we just passed it.
yeah. But
Yep.
I've heard stories of late '90s or early 2000s of there just being the the people participating, the numbers. It was huge.
Wow. And you look at it now, and I think it's huge. I mean, it's still, bringing in hundreds of people at a time from, all corners of the state
Yeah.
and region. So,
Yep.
the fact that it was even bigger, it's kind of mind boggling, right?
Yeah. Tim's a great guy.
Yeah, he is really good guy.
Yeah.
Um, so you need a series. Okay, making a note too. So you need a series out there, a winter,
Yeah, a winter series.
winter series.
Other
Do you
than a
have like,
weekend, other than a week like we have right now.
right, right. So no series races at all right now. I know I've seen, again, just in passing and looking, there's events out there, but none of them are linked together where it's a you can race for a series title kind of thing, or no?
Not necessarily. We do have an
Okay.
event this coming weekend. It's called, I don't know if you ever heard of it's Rule of Three, which is kind of an I wouldn't even call it an up and coming gravel event. It's pretty dang big at this point. It's
Okay.
such a unique event. It's held every May, typically a couple weeks before Unbound Gravel in
Okay.
Kansas. What makes the event really unique is it's called Rule of Three, and it's three because it utilizes single track pavement and gravel. And
Okay.
most people do it on a gravel bike, but it's this
Okay.
balancing act, right? Is you got to have a bike that's
Sure.
good on gravel and pavement, but you also have to have a bike that's good on single track.
Gotcha.
So, what's really special about that event is every January, Andy Chastain and his partner that helps put the race on, they have an event called Rule of 399.
Okay.
So you participate in the event in January here at a highly discounted rate. It's really cool because you pay a certain amount, and if you show up for the event, they refund you. So
Okay.
it kind of gets people to take initiative to show up. So you
Sure.
end up paying $3.99 to participate.
Okay.
And then you get early access to registration for Rule of Three in May. So
Neat. Okay.
that's kind of the only event we have this time of year,
Okay.
and it sells out in minutes. It's pretty cool.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah,
What are you looking forward to this year on your race calendar?
it's a little bit different this year. Um, I wasn't I I've been a part of the Lifetime Grand Prix the past 2 years.
Okay.
Have not had really any good results in the Grand Prix, so did not get accepted for the series this year, which
Oh,
stung quite a bit when I didn't get accepted.
Sure.
But then after a couple weeks went by, I'm like, you know what? I think this opens up a lot of opportunity. I think it opens up opportunity to still participate in select Grand Prix events, not as a Grand Prix athlete, but
Okay.
go to the events that excite me. But
Yep.
also then I have the freedom to do events that I really want to do. Where otherwise, if I was committed to a series like the Grand Prix, I wouldn't necessarily be able to do.
Yeah.
So I just found out actually over the weekend that we're going to start our year off at 24 hours in the Old Pueblo. I
Oh, cool.
I typically do that. Like that's usually a really big goal of mine in terms of a
Yep.
24 solo event.
Yep.
And I've just learned like, you know what, with this year, I have so many races on the calendar. It's too early in the year to bury myself with a solo effort in February. So
Gotcha.
I hopped on the phone, started asking people, hey, would you be interested in doing a duo team? Um, didn't get people to bite as quickly as I was hoping. But then I asked Lachlan Morton, and
Okay.
he was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So we're gonna do it as a duo next month. I guess it's a month ago or a month from today, roughly.
Yeah. Yeah. Roughly.
So
Yep.
yeah, we're gonna kind of take a unique approach. We're gonna do our plan is to do 12 hours on, 12 hours off, rather
Okay.
than switching up every lap
Yep.
or every other lap.
Yeah.
Just kind of make it fun, right? Just
Sure.
go at it a different way, and so that'll be a fun way to start the year.
Very cool. Yeah.
At one of the best events I think in the country, and kind of the
I've heard.
only
I've heard. Oh, I'm sorry. Cut you off again.
no worries, and like kind of the only place in the country that's having racing at that time of year.
Yeah. Right. For sure. Yeah. I've heard such good things, and I've just never made it down. There's another event Aravaipa puts on that's almost always the exact same weekend up here north side of town. So, and I'm almost always involved in that one way or another.
Yeah.
So I got close last year and actually was on a team for a hot minute before again realizing that I had was excited that somebody had asked me to be on their team as well.
Yeah.
So excited that I said yes without looking at the calendar. And then, I had to, 2 days later, tail between my legs, make the phone call that I'm sorry, I'm already booked that weekend. So
Is
one
it
day,
the
one day I'll make it up. I'll make it down there.
is it the same weekend as the trail race in McDowell?
No, well, I mean, I don't believe so. For us, it's the Black Canyon Ultra.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, so it's one of our bigger ones for
Yeah.
sure for the year. It's kind of a if you work there, do anything for Aravaipa, it's kind of an all hands on that weekend.
Yeah.
Everybody gets put in there. So yeah, I figure one of these years I will make it down there. I don't know if I'll ever make it down to compete. I've heard some tales of the trail, but certainly would like to see it at least be part of the excitement for a
Man,
while.
it's such a good event. Like
Yeah.
it's really special. It's special because you don't get as many races that so many people camp at.
Okay.
Like that's what
Yep.
growing up getting involved in the sport, that's what my dad and I used to do is we would travel across the country in our camper and we'd camp at every race.
Okay.
And that was part of the fun. Like that's
Yeah.
half the fun is the camping
Sure.
experience. And
Yep.
like sometimes we'd spend 2 or 3 weeks at a time on the road when I was younger out of this camper and
Okay.
we'd make it work. And
Yep.
it kind of bums me out sometimes now. Like I'm guilty of it. You go to races and you get a hotel or you get an Airbnb and it's kind of disconnected from like the feel of the race.
Sure.
But Old Pueblo definitely does not have that. It has the camping aspect and that's
Yep.
part of the fun.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. I've heard tales of the trying to get there early, trying to get there like Thursday morning, get the good spots, and people who roll in like Friday afternoon are left way
Yeah.
quite a ways back because it is such a big event, obviously so many people. So yeah, you're talking about a lot of cars and a lot of sprinter vans and
Tons.
pull behinds and whatnot. So
Yeah.
that's pretty cool. Definitely makes it a unique experience, I think, in any of the sports that we do, and that making that as a whole weekend, making a whole thing, not just a race. You show up, you run your race, you leave, but having like a whole weekend feel. And it doesn't mean, I'm not trying to say like, races have to have like something that going on the whole weekend,
Yeah.
a race on Saturday and then something else on Sunday to to keep people here.
but to be able to generate that feeling of like, camaraderie, I guess, where everyone does want to stay afterwards, and not
Yeah.
just, have a pint at the beer garden, and then go home, but, actually stay and hang out and spend the night, and campfires and whatever, whatever happens. That's definitely a pretty cool
That's
thing to
that's
have.
the that's the thing, right? Is like everyone has campfires there, so you can either, if you're like the night before the race or during the race, if you're walking by, you can just stop at somebody's campfire, visit with them, go to the
Yeah.
next campfire, hang out with other people. So like there's a bike race going on, but there's so much more that's happening at the same time.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
Do you still, speaking of like big events like that, do
Yeah.
you help put on, uh like, do you work a lot of logistics behind Cocodona?
Yeah. I'm actually race command for Cocodona, so one half of it anyway.
Okay.
So I'm not doing the setup, but I'm there for that week, in the little HQ trailer,
Yeah.
making sure that everyone who starts finishes. Don't get anyone lost along the way.
That race is insane. Like I'm good friends with Dylan Harris, who,
Hmm.
like, worked for
Yep.
Aravaipa, and he's filmed that event, and it's like,
Yeah.
I can't even imagine, let alone like covering that distance on foot, but also the behind the scenes in terms of getting permitting and planning the route has got to be like
Yeah.
at least a year in advance, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think, excuse me, I think Jamil and it was a good friend of his whose name I'm blanking on right now. I just saw him like last week. I shouldn't be, but they actually spent more than a year. I mean, they took a long time, kind of like what you're saying with the trails at home, just kind of linking things together. All right, I know this trail goes here, and I know there's this trail over this way, and it ends on a dirt road. But I think there's a trail just down this dirt road that we can now, go over this way with it. And it was a few years of just kind of putting some of those things together, running them, hiking them, whatever, to
Mm-hmm.
to make sure that they were actually passable and would work for a race. Um, getting that whole plan, from point A to point Z, and then yeah, working those permits. Like, okay, who owns this plot of land now? Like, how do we, is it private? Is it town? Is it BLM? Where do we have to go for the landowner to, what permit application do we need to submit to get this piece? And yeah, some of it is, I believe it is private land, and it's kind of more of a handshake that Stephen has with them.
Yep.
They'll open up the gates for us to let the runners through. They're back 40, and then some of it is, it's, Forest Service or BLM or, municipalities, and there's a little bit that's on the road, but I think they always try to limit it as much as possible. And it's a pretty crazy endeavor
That's
for sure.
wild. I'm a big fan of all the ultra running documentaries on YouTube. Like, I think that sport has really figured out how to tell the story behind
Yeah.
like the activity. Like, they've
Yeah,
done a really good
there's
job.
guys like Dylan. There's guys like Dylan and others out there that have just really brought a keen eye to, whatever they're looking at today, with this particular person or this particular race, and kind of not to say exploited it, not in a bad way, but in a good way, right?
Yeah.
Been be able to show it and tell it, and so the average person can actually watch it and kind of understand, and maybe lace up some shoes and go out for a run or something too.
Yeah. I don't know about 200 plus miles, but
No, you don't start at 200.
gosh, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, the definitely. I mean, for years, obviously it was the 100, right? The 100 was like the goalpost. If you were an ultra marathoner, you wanted to get that 100 in. That was your um, lived and breathed by it. And then I don't know, it's a few years ago, half a dozen or so, that the 200s started becoming what the hundreds were, in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Um, and there's 250s, and there's a number of them that have sprung up. There's certainly quite a bit at this point. East Coast, West Coast, you can find them all over the place. Um, it's definitely interesting. I mean, to take on something like that for 6 days, if you're slow. 6 days if you're slow.
That's crazy.
Yep. Yeah. When do you think the world of mountain biking will get into something like that? I mean, obviously there are stage races that, might cover that distance, but they do stop. right? There's that you stop and you have the nights off or whatnot. Do
Yeah.
you think anyone's going to come up with a 200 point to point? You don't stop until you finish, or you take a trail nap when you want, but you it's not. This is not a stage race. This is a cross country death match.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, those events they've been around and they're becoming more, I would say, prominent. Like stuff, for example, like the AZT. You have
Sure.
the 300 mile,
Yep.
then you have the full AZT where you have to hike through the canyon.
Yep.
But they're popping up a lot more, I would say, on the gravel side of things than on the mountain
Yeah.
bike side of things. Like we have
Yep.
stuff like Unbound where you have the option of you have options of, I think it's 25, 50, 100, 200, and then the XL's the 350 mile loop.
Okay.
Rule of Three, like the event I was talking about, they're adding a 200-mile option this year.
Oh, cool.
We have a couple really cool events here in Arkansas. One called Doom, which is, I think it's bumped up now to a 400-mile loop. Most of it being in the Boston range.
Yep.
So it's super remote, really primitive. Those roads are just, there's nothing flat out there.
Okay.
And then we have what's called the Arkansas High Country route, which is a 1,000-mile route here, which is turning.
Wow.
It's kind of getting more. I would say it's gaining popularity year to year.
Yeah.
So I think those events are pretty exciting and pretty cool because I love the logistics behind that type of event, and that's part of the fun for me. That's part of the challenge. So I hope we see those events kind of show up in the spotlight a little bit more. I know some people would kind of argue that they want those to stay on the down low. For me personally, I hope we can see more people do those and more light shine on them. But yeah, we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, a couple of those you mentioned by name. Most of those that I've heard of that you spoke of, or like AZT and some of the others, are more like they're not a race, right? I mean, there's time. I mean, I guess yes, it's a race, but it's not like it's not like Old Pueblo. It's a little bit different, kind of a race.
There's a
And
grand
most of
depart
them,
date. Like
exactly. So yeah,
grand
exactly.
depart date,
So
or you can ITT it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think the official race, let's just call it, assign some term to it so we know what we're talking about. Do you think the like official races will start growing to those distances and actually putting on like a true, hey, we're gonna have a podium after 400 miles, so better be smiling.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it comes down to permitting, right? Like,
sure.
Also, it's a little bit different, whereas bikes aren't allowed in certain national forests, so that makes things a little more tricky. Whereas you can cut through places like that on foot, so that I wouldn't say it makes it easier. It just logistically for promoters, I would think that causes a bit of a challenge. But there's always a way around that, right? You can always make detours and then come back in. I don't know. I would like to see more events like that pop up personally.
Okay. Making more notes over here.
Yeah, I think I think the more people have to choose from, the better, rather than just always having the same events on the calendar year after year. There's always going to be those events that are on the calendar year after year because they're special, right? They're proven events. But to have something new, to have like maybe even a bigger, more ambitious challenge is important. At least that's what excites me, is having something on the calendar that scares me every year.
We didn't get past Old Pueblo. What's on the calendar that scares you this year?
So we're gonna do Old Pueblo to start the year, and then a couple weeks later we'll be back in Arizona there's a double race weekend. There's BWR, Belgian Waffle Ride, Scottsdale.
Yeah, of course.
Yep. And then the weekend after that's the Cactus Cup stage race. It's a mountain bike race.
Sure. Yep.
But I'd say the biggest goal of the year again is Unbound XL for me.
Okay.
I was fortunate enough to win that race in 2021, and then got COVID in 22, so couldn't go. And then last year just had some mental issues during the race, so want to go back and that's the A race for the year for sure. I love it out in Emporia, and every 2 years they switch the route up.
Okay.
So the past 2 years it's gone south, which I like the northern route a bit more. It's a bit more chunky, so they're back to the northern route, and that's what excites me, is to be on that northern route this year.
So it's the same two, they just switch between those two.
Yeah, the courses obviously will change a bit. They'll utilize different roads. They'll utilize different low maintenance roads, I'm sure. But yeah, typically the southern route is a bit smoother. It's definitely, it's not to say it's any easier. It's just different, right?
Yep.
So yeah, in 21, the year that I was fortunate enough to win it, it went north, and it's back to the north route this year. So I just like it. It has a little more mountain bike feel to it. But yeah, it's like I said, it's not to say that the southern route isn't easy. It's just different.
Gotcha. Very cool.
So that one always scares me. I think anytime you bump up to that distance, that time, I mean, it's daunting. Like every time you line up for stuff like that, you're like, what am I doing? Like, why am I here? But you definitely learn about yourself during that, whether it's good or bad.
For sure. There's a lot that happens during a long distance event like that.
Yeah.
Highs, lows, more highs, more lows. And, I don't know anybody in the world of ultra running or in endurance mountain bikes who, I mean, you like it, right? There's a good thing to be able to explore what's going on up here too, when you have all those miles to get through. Excuse me. But everyone, it's a love-hate relationship, right? It's some people don't want to know, or they I mean, it certainly can take away from your race. So obviously you want to just, you're trying to stay positive the whole time, just, on the surface of being like, I'm racing, I want to get through this. But there's certainly some positivity in being able to explore those spaces too, because there's not a lot of other times during life that you have that opportunity, whether you've got home life, you've got work, family, you got all these other things going on. And it's not like we have most of us, I should say probably Americans, first worlders, whatever, we don't have that time to slow down. We don't slow down. We just go from one thing to the next. So it is those it's those of us who choose to take these crazy endeavors on, who put ourselves into that space where I've got, I'm going to be on here for a lot of hours. What's going to happen? Where is my mind going to take me? Because you can see the pretty flowers, and there's a mountain over there, and there's a rock formation that's kind of cool, and then all of a sudden something turns.
Yeah.
And
it's like everyone is excited and feels good and is positive at the start, right? But
right.
Once the sun goes down, like, it's a different world. It's a totally different world out there. So sometimes it's easier to manage that than others. I feel like some races you kind of have it dialed from start to finish. Obviously you struggle. And then, man, there's other times where it's like, I just can't get through this. Like, there's so many things that either happen or you just, I don't know. I can only speak for myself, but it's like, there's times where I can handle it mentally, and there's times where I can't handle it mentally. And it's a bummer for sure, but you just kind of learn what to expect, and go into the next one, you learn a little bit more. You go into the next one, you learn a little bit more, and you're never going to perfect it. It's always going to be hard. But that's what keeps me coming back.
Yeah. And I think once you learn that too, right, it takes a few of those times that it happens. Because at first you're like, oh, this sucks, and I'm gonna get out of it. Or that's, and it's, at the end of the race, like, this isn't gonna happen again. But yeah, once you learn that each one of those times is a journey in of itself, right? This little side journey that you're taking during your race, or it could be just training, right? We say about races, but it can happen when you're on a long training ride or run as well. It's always going to be a journey, that part, that aspect, because like you said, you're never going to perfect it. You're never going to be like, oh, it's creeping in on me. I can kind of feel it. And it's like, I know that trick to, it's a 2 goos, a splash of water, and chant this mantra 5 times. It doesn't push it away. It's still going to happen if it's going to happen, right, when it creeps up. So
Yeah.
It's better just to, it might be sort of Buddhist of me to say, and I'm probably offending a lot of Buddhists right now, but it's better just to embrace it, right? And actually kind of ride it and explore it, and come out
And
of it,
that's
find that positivity, find that good thing that you can take out and be like, oh, okay, there was a reason.
Yeah, and that takes a lot of practice for sure.
For sure. Yep.
Like
For sure.
you may feel like you master it the first time, but man, if you go back the second time, it could be a total gong show, and you're like, I thought I had it after the first time. Like sometimes the first time is actually the easiest because you don't know what you're getting into.
Right. Yeah.
And then you go around the second, third, fourth time, and you're like, man, I know what I'm getting myself into, and like I chose to be here, but man, it's gonna be hard. And
yep.
So yeah, it's tough, but that's what draws me to stuff like that. It's definitely not easy, and I've failed way more times than I've succeeded, and it's like that's part of the fun.
It is. Yeah. It's the whole thing is an exploration, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's this journey that we're on, these journeys that we put ourselves into. Because we could certainly take easier ones, like you said. They're definitely hard, and we make the choice to go this way. So those of us who enjoy these sports, you've been very outspoken about and very honest about some of the mental anguish times that you've had in the past. And I wasn't necessarily going to go this way with the conversation, but it sort of like led to that. And I know you have 2 videos from Dylan on your website. Is it 2? Or is there a second one?
We did. Dylan and I did one together.
Okay. I might be just thinking of another clip, maybe that's on that page too. But that highlighted some of the aspects that you'd had of it, of some of your issues. Can you explain some of it to you? Because I actually I've skimmed through some of the video. I watched some of it, but I didn't have time to sit down for the whole thing. I swear I will afterwards. But yeah, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of those at times that you had.
Yeah, like for the longest time, I had kind of always hid what I was going through with my mental health, anxiety, and depression in particular. Started at a really, really young age. I remember it. I've told this story a couple times, so apologies if people have heard it, but I specifically remember it starting after a family vacation to California when I was really young. And then coming home from that vacation, just being, it was hard. It's kind of hard to explain, but I remember feeling emotion really, really, really heavily at a young age.
Okay.
Like if we'd go on a trip, I think everyone experiences post-vacation blues, right?
Sure. Yeah.
You kind of get back into the swing of things. And you're like, man, I miss being like off and kind of being carefree. But even from a young age, like it was not normal the way it hit me. It was like, it was heavy, heavy, heavy. I remember being in tears for days after certain experiences and like wishing I could have that back. And I remember thinking back then, like something is different. I wouldn't say off, but just different.
Okay.
And then always dealt with that when I was really young. And then fast forward to middle school and high school, I really knew something was off or different. And then when Mary and I started dating, now my wife, I really let her in on what was going on. Pretty dark, depressive episodes, even in high school. And then I would say things got pretty dark after, specifically after Christmas in 2009. That was a really, really bad year for me personally. That year, my mom was diagnosed with cancer for the second time. My parents got divorced, and our house burned down on Christmas night.
Oh, jeez. Wow.
And I was dealing with all this depression leading up to that, and then that kind of just boom, like blew things up. And during that time, I was in and out of doctors on medication, and then I would freak myself out that I was on medication. I would stop that medication cold turkey because I was like, I don't want to rely on this. Stopping that cold turkey was an absolute nightmare of an experience. And you would think that I would have learned from that, but I would go back, try a different medication, do the exact same thing. So it was this just roller coaster. And the only one I really filled in was Mary about what was happening. And that eventually turned into like suicidal thoughts. Um, and I was really afraid to tell anybody about what was going on except her. And I had to tell her what was going on because it was scaring me inside my head, what was
Sure.
taking place. And
Yeah.
fast forward to 2021, actually shortly before Unbound, the year that I won, I had a really bad accident a couple months before that, really bad concussion, and that's when things just spiraled. Like it was bad.
Okay.
So she, what was really comforting about telling her is she didn't freak out. She was like, okay, let's like get down to the bottom of this. Let's find out the why behind it, rather than like pressing the alarm button and just panicking. So
Sure.
at the time we went into a specialist, and I went through a full session, full treatment period of ketamine therapy, which I'm sure is stigmatized in some people's books, but for me it worked. It helped a lot. And then going in depth with counseling multiple times a week. And I'd been through certain counselors at a young age while I was on and off antidepressants. And
Mhm.
it was one of those things, like I said, I just hid for the longest time. And I realized like it's doing more damage hiding this stuff than it is. I realized like talking about it openly is actually helping me, and in turn, hopefully helping other people. And so it wasn't like I was looking for like pity in any way. It was more like it was this weight off my chest of like saying what was really going on. And
Yeah.
I always tried to kind of block it out using the bike
Okay.
and training and having events on the calendar. And that eventually turned into like it compounded on itself, and the bike became this negative outlet because the
Yeah.
stresses, like we were talking about earlier, of like going into those deep dark places during events, that would then trigger other episodes.
Sure.
And so I had learned for, I would say, in the past couple of years of like, don't run away from it, kind of try and face it head on with the help of, I'm very fortunate to have my wife that helps me with all of this. And I have
Yeah.
supportive friends, supportive family members, and like I feel really lucky to have that. And it makes me, I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, is I feel really fortunate to have that support. Other people don't. And I can't,
Yeah.
like, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have support. And
Right.
so I think that's just why I'm passionate about it, is because there's other people out there that don't have close friends or close family members that they can talk to about this type of stuff.
Yep.
It's scary to think like, what do you do? I don't know. I don't have that answer, but I know for me personally, I did have that support, and I'm like forever grateful for it. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a long-winded answer of just saying I had to I had to talk about it openly because it helps me personally,
Yeah.
um, and hopefully it
Yeah.
helps other people.
I'm sure it does. I mean, from what I know of anything, whether it's mental illness or not, um, it's the repression that and not acknowledging it, and not working through it. Whichever way. And you mentioned, some treatments might not have the same, might have stigma attached to them, but there's multiple treatments out there, multiple modalities of fixing and working on anything, and it's not doing anything. I think is what hurts people more.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
Maybe not, and not everybody has the same reaction, right? They may not feel like they can talk, or they maybe not openly they can talk to a therapist or something else, and more keep it more private. Some people don't feel they can talk at all, and let the medications or the other modalities work for them that way too. But I can't imagine that, getting your story out there really would be hurting anyone in any way, even if that's not the way that, they feel that they need to go through theirs.
hmm
Thank you for sharing. That's a amazing story. And it sounds like you found a good life partner there. Um,
yes,
she's a rock for you.
yeah, absolutely. Like I don't know where I'd be. We met, yeah, I mean, we met in high school ceramics class, and we've been together ever since. But yeah, it's like it's sad to think that there's people that either don't have a significant other, they don't have parents or close enough friends in their life to talk to about stuff like this. Because
Yeah.
for me, just talking about it, if I'm going through an episode, is like, oh, I can breathe now, right? Or if I go through like if I have anxiety attacks, it's like I don't really know how to handle that yet fully by myself. Uh,
Yeah.
maybe that's embarrassing to say, maybe not, but like if Mary's there, it's so much easier. And I don't know. I don't know how you get people help that don't have it. Um, you can say you can be there for them, but how do you get them to open up about what's really going on?
And
Right?
that's the real thing.
It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard for the person to trust somebody to speak about what's going on.
Yeah.
And on the other end, it's hard to actually be there for somebody. Like you want to be there 100% for them. Right?
Yeah.
So it's a tough place for sure. And there's people out there in all walks of life that are going through something. The
Yeah.
thing I've learned is like don't ever discount what somebody's going through. Like
Exactly.
you never know what's going on.
Yeah.
They could portray something that they have everything's
Yep.
great, but behind closed doors they could be in a dark place.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what Instagram's for, right? It's everything's flowers and rainbows over here.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree for sure. You know, there's a lot of folks who are probably don't have that outlet or don't feel like they do, and um, you know, it all it does is take is that asking that first question, you know, talking to somebody, sitting down, and hopefully getting something, you know, some help that they need,
Yep.
one way or the other, because sitting on it by themselves usually doesn't work. From you know the stories that I've heard, right, and the
For
people
sure.
that you hear about others, it never seems to end well when you just keep it all into yourself and don't have some sort of outlet.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard thing. And the scariest thing I think is asking for that help,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Like Mary had always had like for the longest time she knew what was going on, but not to a certain extent. Like in 2021 when I really filled her in what was going on, it was like, okay, this is when we need to like pump the brakes. We're going to get this figured out, at least get on the track of getting it figured out because things can't continue this way. It was going to
Gotcha.
things were going to end up badly or just I remember telling her it was like I think the quote I used was like I'm not willing to be around any longer if this is how my life is going to be.
Hmm.
And then once I said that is when she's like, okay, well, like let's go, we'll get it figured out. So that was really comforting.
Yeah. Jeez, that's harsh. But again, you found a rock there.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
maybe we'll get her on the podcast next.
yeah. She's awesome. She's awesome.
um, wow. So again, thank you. That's I mean, thanks for sharing. I know you have told the stories, and that's one of the reasons why I wasn't necessarily going to go down this route with the conversation, because it's already out there in other forms, but don't always have to retell them. But thank you for
Yeah, no
being
worries.
open and sharing again.
Thanks for.
Yeah, yeah. Let's talk about some bikes some more though.
Okay.
We'll bring the roller coaster back up. You're doing more endurance stuff, and you've mentioned it a couple times. And you've mentioned the gravel a few times. We just had our very first gravel race here at Aravaipa last month.
Oh, sweet.
And it was a huge success. I feel it was a huge success. Definitely some big learnings. Definitely different. All of our races before are pretty much straight cross country mountain bike.
Where'd you guys do the gravel event at?
It was at McDowell.
Okay.
So it was we have a race there in December called Frenzy Hills, and it's been a cross country only race with different distances from 10 all the way up to 100 miles.
Mm-hmm.
The big distances mostly using Pemberton, loops on Pemberton. Well, this friend of mine had turned me on to, and I hope I don't butcher it. I think it's azgravelsrides.com. They're also on Facebook and socials and stuff like that. And they have a
Yep.
number of different, gravel options that they have put out there all around the state. You can, pick your region of Arizona, and they have a bunch of loops and paths and stuff like that.
That's how I got into gravel riding.
Was it?
Stumbling across that that page. That's what was like,
Awesome.
what's this?
Nice. My friend was a mountain biker, had kind of gotten out of the sport and done some other things, and was kind of coming back into it, but really didn't want to do any of the technical kind of stuff. He really just enjoys being on the trail off road, but doesn't want to work too hard. He enjoys that smooth gravelly piece to it.
Yeah.
So he had found this loop on the website, and he said, "Hey, let's I'm going out. You want to come ride with me?" And so we had ridden it. It's probably about a year ago, roughly. Loved it. It was just a great, fun, flowy. Had a couple of good climbs in it, some two really good descents in it as well. You're out there. It's a 25, 26 mile loop. So you're out there for a good couple hours, and it was just fun. It was like different from usually when you go to McDowell, it's Pemberton, right? Or you go to the comp side if you're going to do loops over there. But it usually has something to do with Pemberton if you're on the other side of the park. And there was even it introduced me, this particular loop introduced me parts of the park I didn't even realize had trails. There were trails out there that I didn't even know, I'd never known about. And I would consider McDowell fairly close for some of the regional parks. From where I'm at, it's not a difficult drive. And so just finding, back to that exploration, finding different parts of the same parcel of land that I've run and biked and hiked on a number of times. And then where are we? We're still here. It's like, so I reached out to AZ Gravel Rides, and I said, I really, really like this loop. I have a race in December at McDowell, and I'd like to add it as a gravel. They call it the Angry Coyote. So on his website, it's called the Angry Coyote Loop. I'm
Okay.
like, I'll give you all props for it. I won't use your name as part of, we have a name for our race already, so I'll just incorporate it in. But I'd love to be able to, basically, take your loop and add it in. And he was more than willing to do that. Add it into our course. So we advertised it. We did there's one loop or two loop options. So 25 or 50 miles. And like I said, there was definitely some learning on our part because again, I've never ridden gravel except for on my cross country bike. I don't have a gravel bike, so and I don't have a road bike, so I'm really not familiar as much, with the speed side of what you can do with those bikes, for sure. And so there were definitely some, like I said, some learnings, but it's coming back next year. We're going to increase it. We'll have a potentially 75, but definitely I'll have a 100-mile option.
Nice.
And we do have a duo. So the 50 also had a duo option if you wanted to split it between two. So we'll look at either duo or maybe even quad teams on the 100, but you could do it as a 100 solo as well. And that's the way the cross country one runs. It's like the 25 is obviously the solo because it's one loop, but the 50 and the 100 we have duo and quad for the hundreds as well. So definitely bring it back and looking at some other of our current races where we could add a gravel category in.
Nice.
That would be a strict gravel thing. So long-winded way of asking you the question of like, do you have a preference between the two? If you're out there doing endurance, would you rather be on a gravel course on a gravel bike, or be more the cross-country style? Still your thing?
Yeah, the mountain bike's definitely my thing still.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's weird because I don't know. Like for example, this time of year, the majority of my training time is spent on pavement, like training, kind of like base training.
Yep.
But then, when it comes to racing, mountain biking definitely is kind of where my heart is.
Yep.
And then after that is definitely gravel. Anything off road is what I'm passionate about. I've never raced on the road. I just utilize the road bike for training. But it's, I don't know, something about racing on single track that really really excites me. But then again, like you have events, like I said, rule of three that incorporate all of them. You got single track, gravel, and pavement. So it's like I feel this shift in the past year of, I kind of feel like the sport as a whole has moved away from mountain bike racing and more towards gravel racing.
Mm-hmm.
And I love racing on the gravel bike, but it makes me sad to think like mountain bike racing is, I wouldn't say getting phased out, but when you see the participation at gravel events versus mountain bike events, the trend is typically, lately at least, more people at gravel events than mountain bike races.
Yeah.
So how do we get people back at mountain bike races? And I think it's gravel's probably more accessible,
Sure.
right?
Yep.
You can pretty much have one bike for you don't need a road bike anymore. You can have a gravel bike.
Right. Right.
And you can get off the pavement and get away from cars. So I think that's a big role that I don't think we can control. Like,
right.
people are going to gravitate towards the bike that they have and participate
Sure.
in those races. But it's been like, how do we get people back at true mountain bike races? Like, I don't know the answer to that, but I hope there can be a shift back towards like almost an even split. I don't know if it'll ever get there, but
Right.
yeah, it's an interesting time.
Yeah, for sure. I think from my position directing races too, um, I see the shift a little bit. Again, we don't have our races have been pretty much strictly cross country style. Um, not a ton of climbing even, we're not doing a whole lot of downhill. I mean, most of our races, we have one in Flagstaff and the rest are here around Phoenix, so not not a ton of like true downhill available to us.
Yeah.
And but definitely seeing, and I think from me, and I don't know if I'm maybe going to offend someone by saying this, but I think I see the gravel either tends to be, like you said, kind of coming out of the cross country, and is something that's a little bit more accessible, a little bit easier on the shoulders. Less, it's maybe not quite as beat up at the end of the day. But I see quite a bit of crossover from the road. As you know, we have a lot of road cycling here too with Ironman, and there's a few other tries as well. So there's a lot of road cyclists, and I think it's a way that they kind of get off the road. Can still get some training in. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's cross training in any way, because it's pretty much the same. Just on a path instead of on the road. Taking the beeline highway for 50 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
But I kind of see it. It seems to be from most of the folks that I've run across. It sort of seems to be one or the other, where it's and I think people actually, I almost said the opposite, but I think people are actually enjoying it and making it their primary. Maybe even getting off the road and using the road as like, well, it's hey, I haven't been on the road bike in a while. Let me take a spin on it. But they're enjoying that gravel experience, and I think the mountain biking guys are kind of doing the same when they get into it. I don't know the answer to the question that you were asking. I started off by saying, it's from my aspect, directing races. It's certainly an answer I'd love to noodle around with a little bit more to see, especially for someone who does more true mountain biking and cross country races. Then we don't do an enduro. We don't do. We have the one gravel, and I mean, I saw the writing on the wall with, like you said, the attendance was astronomical for for the first time ever offering one. It was probably 50-50, right about even split between the cross country categories and the gravel.
For the
and the
first
gravel
year being on
for the first year, and it only had the two, right? It only had the 25 or the 50-mile option. While the cross country I had a 10, a 25, 50, and 100. And those 150s also had the split with the relay teams. So we had a number of categories, a lot more categories on the cross country side. Mountain biking, but almost half the field was on the gravel.
Yeah, and I think in Phoenix it makes a little more sense that like people are on drop bar bikes, whether that be road or primarily gravel, because Phoenix has such a good canal system.
Yeah.
Like it's underrated how good the canal system is in Phoenix. You can put in so many miles off of like busy side streets or busy like main thoroughfares, right? You can ride pretty safely. So that makes a little more sense there of why people may only have a gravel bike and may not have a mountain bike, right? They may live in Gilbert, where like, where do I drive to ride my mountain bike? I drive to South Mountain or to Haas. Like, it's a little bit of a haul to get to either of those places. Whereas you can hop on the canal either a couple blocks from your house and ride 25, 50 miles. So that kind of makes sense. But it's like, well, what did we do before gravel bikes? Like, there was a lot of people on mountain bikes, so I don't know. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't know the answer, but it's an interesting time, and I just hope we don't see more mountain bike races go away in
Yep.
place of gravel races. I hope that they both have their place, and I hope it encourages people to those that have a gravel bike only, maybe they consider getting a mountain bike as well, or those
Yeah.
that only have a mountain bike, they consider getting a gravel bike as well. And there's double the events that everyone can participate at.
Exactly.
So, but it's hard.
Yep.
It's a hard answer, and
Yeah.
I you're in the business of that, right? I'm not. I can see it when I go to races of in terms of the participation.
Yeah. Yeah. No, well, I think, you said it, the accessibility is there. I think, anybody who's ridden a bike, most of us, got a bike at some point growing up, and most of those were road bikes. It's
Yep.
you maybe got, a BMX style bike, junior high-ish, 9, 10, 11, whatever, and that allowed you to get off-road because the tires were just a little bit wider and had a little bit of a knobby tread to it. So but most of us, and there are definitely notable exceptions, weren't doing too many crazy things, at least right off the bat. We gave it a little bit of time on that before we're like, hey, I'm going to hit this this sand pit over here and then see what I can, what kind of damage I can do on this bike. And then and then somebody said, hey, if we build a park, maybe you could ride around. And then so that kind of grew up. But I think the majority, and I digress there. I think the majority of us, had like a road style bike to start with, or and then graduated to like the 10 speed, or that's what we called it back then.
Yep.
The bike you got from Sears, you just rolled it off of the Sears floor. It had 10 speeds, it had drop bars and 2 wheels and a seat, and you could go to school in it, you go see your friends, whatever. But for the majority of us, that's what it was. And for the very few who liked it and made it into a hobby or a sport, whether they went in the triathlon or just cycling, racing, or just as a hobby, but um, pursuing it, you got maybe a faster, lighter, whatever, more specialized type bike. And some of us, trended over towards the dirt, so we went with the wider knobby tires and started doing stuff. But that gravel does hit right in the middle, and
Yep.
everybody can pretty much ride it. You don't need any extra skills. You don't need to know how to step up that rock.
Yep.
And so it's for someone who might be a little bit more nervous about getting on a cross country bike and hitting one of those trails, going to South Mountain for that first time.
Yeah.
This kind of does it. They can get that enjoyment of the ride. They're not on the road with all the cars or on a bike path or something like that, and they can get out into nature, do that exploration that we were talking about, but at a pace and a comfort level that hits them.
Yeah. Comfort level is the big key there, right? Is
Yeah.
like you get someone that rents a mountain bike and you take them to South Mountain. It's like, that might be. I remember my first time on South Mountain. I'm like, people ride this
It's no
stuff?
joke.
I'm like, how do you ride? Like, I don't.
Yep.
I remember getting in the sport and be like, this is impossible. Like, I can barely hike down it, let
Right.
alone ride a bike. So
Yep.
it's intimidating to get into it at first, especially if
For
you
sure.
live in the Phoenix area. Like, stuff is rocky there. There's not.
Yeah.
I mean, there are trails that cater towards someone just getting into the sport, like we talked about. South Mountain has Desert Classic. There's
Sure.
still some gnarly stuff on Desert Classic,
For sure.
right?
Yeah.
So if you get somebody on a canal path to get their feet wet,
Yeah.
that's a bit more manageable, and that's a bit more
Yep.
comforting for someone. I know for me, if gravel bikes were around back then, I definitely would have
Right.
I would have saved from having a lot of scars if I went that
Right.
way first and then
Yep.
graduated towards a mountain bike. But so there's definitely options towards people. The thing is, I mean, you probably just get more accustomed to like outrunning res dogs if you ride gravel in the Phoenix area.
For sure. Yeah. I took my son when he was younger to South Mountain when he had his first. It was still, but it was a BMX style, but it did have like it was I'm losing my words here. It had shocks. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, well, it's got a little bit more to be a little bit more forgiving. He knew, obviously had been riding a bike for a while. This wasn't his very first bike, but it was his first really kind of off road and mountain. So I took him there, and we were just on at the Pima Trailhead area, just on the national trail, basically the Jeep Road.
Yep.
That first mile or so, I wasn't going to take him on a trail. I wanted him just on the dirt, yeah. And that was just gnarly enough for, a young kid. He was probably, 8 or so. So, young, but not,
Yeah.
Not, he wasn't, off the Strider bike onto South Mountain.
Yeah.
But that was enough too, that I remember that he was not pleased by, within 30 minutes, he was kind of like, can we turn around and go
I'm
home?
done with this.
And I looked at him then, and I kind of just looked at, the ground around me, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, this isn't just a dirt road, is it? I mean, it's, there's again some pretty exposed rock, and it's sharp, and it's bumpy.
Loose.
It doesn't, yeah, very loose. Yep. Obviously smaller tires for a little kid's bike like that, so he couldn't ride over some of that stuff that I could on a big boy bike.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a one and done. We didn't take him back there for a while.
Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
like you
it's,
want to avoid those introductions for people just getting into it, because you want
right.
them to come back to the sport, right? You don't want to steer them away from the sport. But
Right. Exactly.
You don't know until somebody tries, but it's better to lean on the side of caution than it is to just say, hey, go up to the top of national and come down. It's like, I don't know. It could be the last ride, or it could be the ride that turns them onto it. Like, you don't, I feel like that's playing with fire.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I console myself when I think of this or tell this story, because at least he was younger, so he's probably forgotten it now at this point.
Yeah.
I hope. We did get him back there on that and other bikes, so he did. He took up the sport for a short while, although he was never quite as into it as his father was. But yeah, it wasn't the last ride. But yeah, like, if you brought an adult there, right? You bring a 31-year-old who's maybe had a little bit of experience with off-road again, maybe just that BMX when they were a kid, or, maybe pushing it a little bit into mountain biking in high school or something, but maybe they didn't follow through much with it. When we get to be a little bit older, there's, things to be scared about, and you're a little bit higher on that bike than you were when you were a kid, that last time you rode on the dirt.
You understand the consequences of it more.
Right. You already have scars from getting through life and doing other things, and you're looking at that one like, that's going to leave a mark if I hit that rock wrong. Like, what are you doing? Why did you bring me here?
Yeah.
We've started using, I'm sure you rode Brown's Ranch plenty of times while you're here. So I've started, whether I'm bringing someone out or telling them when they're brand new and really kind of just getting into the sport, young or old, I'm like, go to Brown's Ranch and make the trip.
Such a good spot,
because that's a great spot to just get your feet wet, right?
Yep.
Learn how to control it, going a little bit downhill and making a corner and on some of that loose stuff, but you're not really going to get hurt too much.
That's a perfect example of a place that caters towards everybody.
Yeah.
Like, it can be fun for the beginner all the way to the professional athlete. Like, stuff out there is a blast.
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's that whole black trail section in the middle, the diamond section. And if you just want to go for miles and miles on any bike, I mean, if you don't even have to go far, right? You can do a small loop and like do 10 mile loops and use your car as an aid station and top off the water every time you come through, and do 100 miles and in an afternoon. Or you can do a bigger loop, or connect even going north, towards the mountains there, and Bulldog Trailhead, and up that way, and back on the Maricopa Trail. There's so many options. And again, like you said, like every from super beginner, never been on a bike, to the expert, you're gonna get some fun times out there.
Yeah, Brown's Ranch is awesome because it's cool because you can link everything from the south or the north, right? You can link up in Bow, or you can, like you said, you hit Maricopa, go out towards Seven Springs, like endless in that area.
Yeah, very cool, fun stuff. Well, I feel like I've taken up enough of your time. I know you're an hour ahead of me, so I don't know what time it is. It's 6:30 your time, so
yeah, just after 6:30.
I don't want to take up your whole evening, but I wanted to say thanks for jumping on and joining, and just chatting today. This was really fun. We'll have to catch up maybe one of these times that you come to Arizona for a race, or if you're coming back for family, and join us for one of our group rides, or if you're ever in town and it just happens to be one of our races. Excuse me, love to have you, even if you just come and hang out.
For sure.
There's when I told I've mentioned to a few people that I was going to be talking to you this week, and they were like super excited. There's there's a lot of love for you still back here. So
Well,
yeah, I'm sure whether they're friends or acquaintances that you've just seen over the years on the trails or at a race or something like that. There's probably some people who'd love to see you now that you're spending your time out there.
yeah. Well, I appreciate the time very much, man. It's been great to communicate back and forth, and I would love to meet up when we're back, like in Arizona. Like I said, we're out there plenty of times throughout the year, and just really appreciate the time you set aside for me tonight. And also, just thank you for putting out the content that Aravaipa does. Like, I'm obsessed with the ultra running documentaries, and
Yeah.
the stuff that comes out that is linked with Aravaipa on YouTube is incredible, and it keeps me entertained. So I love it, and I'm sure the work that you put on behind the scenes, people just don't understand what it's like to see the intricacies that goes on for these races. So yeah, thank you for everything that you guys do.
Absolutely. So I have to ask, since you brought it back up, have you checked out specifically to us, and I'm sure there's other races that probably do it too, but have you checked out any of the live streams?
Cocodona.
Obviously less documentary, but just I mean, it's still up there on YouTube, right? You can watch all 6 days. Usually it's 2 or 3 different feeds for the day, because I think YouTube has a limit as to how many hours you can put out in one chunk. But there's some pretty fun stuff that's it's live. It's pretty much done live, and it's pretty neat to see when that is happening too. Not even a scripted, not even a scripted documentary.
Yeah, it's cool because like I am the worst runner. That's like, you don't want to see me run to the mailbox and back.
Okay.
So I kind of live vicariously through these ultra documentaries and these live streams because it's so impressive to me. So every year Cocodona goes on, I'm pretty linked in on the live stream.
Cool, very cool. I have to figure out a way to do that. I don't know if I'm a storyteller enough, but do some more on the biking side. Get some actual short videos, or even longer videos, whatnot. But there's a few ideas that are rolling around up in my head. It's just a matter of time and all that stuff to put it all together. Well, anyway, thank you again. This has been great. I will let you know when this is actually going to drop. It'll be probably a couple of weeks. That way you can, if you want to share it out too. I did want to ask, even if we hadn't gone down into the conversation, the video that's on Dylan's video that's on your website. Do you host it there? Like, would you be able to share the link, or could we put the link in with this podcast when we release it? That way we can kind of, hey, if people want to see a little bit more about Taylor,
absolutely,
we can figure out a way to do that. I
Yeah,
don't know if it's as simple as just copying the link to ours, or if there's like an ownership that we'd have to get a kind of a password kind of thing to it. But
no, it's just on YouTube. I think it can be accessed either through Dylan's channel directly, and it can also be linked through my channel directly as well.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, that'd be great. So when this comes out, I will make sure that in the intro or the outro that I record just for this, I'll make sure that I mention that it's there, and we'll drop that link in so that people can check that video out.
Sweet.
Check you out. Check out Dylan's work too, because he's got a pretty good eye for the sport.
Awesome.
Yeah, miss that guy rolling around the offices and stuff, like the hallways and stuff. But he's got his own thing going on, and that's pretty good too. We see him once in a while still pop up at a race or something like that too. So
sweet,
good times. So yeah, thank you, Taylor, for coming out, talking to us. Well, I guess you stayed home, so you didn't really come out. But thanks for taking some of your Monday to chat with us. This is really cool, and I hope we can catch up sometime when you're in Arizona. And I have to tell you, not just talking to you, but again, I've heard it just through the talking to people in the industry that the Bentonville area is a must visit if you want to get some. If you're going for a bike vacation,
if you're ever out here, let me know.
Yeah, for sure. I will absolutely let you know.
Awesome.
Cool. All right.
Thank you so much
again
for the time.
Yeah.
I
Same
appreciate
here.
it very much.
I appreciate you. Thanks a lot, Taylor.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.